Yeah, so my name is Oscar. I work at Minecraft, as mentioned. And today I'm going to talk about prototyping, and especially being mindful about the effort that you put into prototyping. Also, I'm going to wrap it in a little bit of like a team and organizational context. How can you be more collaborative and kind of smoothen out the kinks of building really cool prototypes and making like cool design happen because of that. Okay, so Minecraft, as mentioned, it's a super popular game, and quite recently we actually started up kind of a UX initiative, a team that solely focuses on the user interfaces and the UIs that lets the user accomplish kind of all of the things in the Minecraft world. One of the biggest challenges, just to give you some context, is that Minecraft is on basically every platform you can imagine. It's on PCs, obviously, but it's on all consoles, basically. It's in VR, any kind of touch platform you can think of, Apple TV. I could basically go on. We are kind of a widespread game, and from an interaction design standpoint, lots of different input methods we're working with, and screen sizes, of course. Also, the thesis was mentioned. I am actually doing research, I guess, into prototyping methods, and this summer I will try to publish kind of a set of cards. There are 25 strategies for scaling prototyping work in design teams. So look out for that. As mentioned also, I was an engineer before, but now I'm doing design. Right, so prototyping. Why is this an activity that you might need to be mindful about doing? Let's actually start here. So what's a prototype? Well, when it comes to like proper definitions, it's a bit rough, but it's like something that comes before a final thing, right? In the most general sense. But in UX design, I think you can say that this is pretty much the definition. It's like what goes after you've made a mock-up, you've drawn the UI, but you still want to like keep investing into the design artifact to like make a more full articulation of your design. But what's happened? What I've observed with this situation is that, well, more and more, we've started to kind of put on more weight into this prototyping part of our work, because it's turned out to be kind of beneficial. All right, so more than mockups. To contextualize this a little bit more, I like to show this quote. It's from an American architect. I think it's a really cool quote to go back to. You can use an eraser on the drafting table or a sledgehammer on the construction side. What I think is happening when we are investing more and more into building really kind of complex prototypes is that we are starting to mix up what is the drafting table and what is the construction side. We got some delays here with the thingy. That's fine. You're just gonna have to see these words again. Maybe I need to stand here. Right, we're mixing these up. Okay, so if we go back, I mean, this is an activity that you are familiar with, like wireframing, perhaps using balsamic mockups like this, or actually drawing UIs. But what I've seen is that this is kind of getting less attention, and less of the overall design process is spent in this phase. And rather, we're starting instead to work these really complex prototyping apps into our workflows. Like origami, for example, something I use a lot, or Framer. Wow. I was like, is that like an animal screaming at me or something? right, Framer, where you actually like write code to build your prototypes. And the thing that you create from these apps, I mean, it's amazing. It's masterpieces of showing design. I mean, just pulling some examples from the websites of these apps, you can build like 360 photo viewers and like amazing animations and transitions. And for designers, this stuff it's crack basically. It's like you're having a field day with these tools basically, because you're not spending that much effort, but you're actually getting really rich artifacts out of it, right? But what I want to dive into a little bit through these three lenses is how does this affect the overall collaboration workflow in the teams, and kind of the flexibility of moving ideas until they actually like ship to the end user. So these are the lenses that I usually bring up when it comes to prototyping. But today, actually, since it's UXDX, I'm actually going to spend a little bit more time with these two. Right. Okay, so let's dive into collaboration. So prototyping as a tool for collaboration. I guess most of you will agree that projects tend to move in this direction. You start out with some kind of user need or some kind of thing that like a design part of the team takes care of to like process and figure out what will actually like the features that we need. And then it's kind of moving on to more like a technology side where actual code gets coded and shipped to users. And I like to map this on a graph. Sorry, I know it's late, but we're going to do some graph things here. So looking at the y-axis, we're going to look at the fidelity of where kind of the things that are built are in. And then it's the project time here. So what usually happens is that the design team kind of looks into like the requirements basically for the feature, and they start building on their kind of artifacts for representing the design. All right, and then there's kind of a handoff. I mean, this is a generalization, but generally projects, at least from my experience, move with this kind of trend. And then similarly, like the engineering team starts building with the same, like towards like a similar fidelity of artifact. And what tends to happen, again from my experience, is that some of the effort that was put into the design artifacts actually don't make it to the end users because, you know, scope and things like that. Right. And with this kind of graph, I think you can start looking for like what are like optimizations that you can do to perhaps make your workflow a bit more efficient. And one thing is down here. Oh, I should actually explain that before we move on. That we have an engineering team that might not be able to start working until we have like the specification completed. And one technique that we've started working with when it comes to designing Minecraft is to make, there we go, wireframe prototypes. And we have one here. So this is a prototype that captures all the navigation, the interactions, the flows, but it's completely like lacking when it comes to like visual fidelity. And these kind of prototypes, we've like started to realize that they can work really well as like an initial specification when it comes to communicating what we want to do to the more technical folks on our teams. Right. So what we get from these when it comes to like specification, it's not the UI details, but it's like the navigation, the data flows, like the input and output methods, perhaps when we need to do requests, if we want like complex like transitions between screens, stuff like that. We can like spec that out with this style of artifact. And then that's actually a really good starting point for the front-end architecture, if you want to build something like that. Yeah, and here's just another one that I accidentally clicked past. Okay. Just trying to capture as much interaction and flow as possible, like the complexity of like the structure, and scale away all the visual details. Okay. And then maybe something like this can happen. We can have like an earlier handoff, and the engineering side of our team can start working earlier. So another thing that I want to look into is, what if designers could spend this kind of effort that's up here, that never actually ships, in a more efficient way that actually produces value for what's released? Yeah, how should designers spend their time better when it comes to that extra bit of polish that kind of is at risk of not shipping? Yeah, I mean, this is a problematic topic, I think, but design with code. I mean, I'm like fully in support of not becoming like a software engineer as a designer. You have enough of stuff to do, but when it comes to finding optimizations between teams, I think there are things to look at here that are really interesting. One thing could be, if you're using front-end architecture on the web like React, is that there tools have started to pop up that actually pull out like parts of an app from the overall workflow of the engineer and presenting it in tools that are more like suitable for designers to tweak the design. So we got compositor.io, one tool like that. Another one is storybook.js that actually produces kind of a library of components in kind of an isolated tool that lets you tweak like design aspects, perhaps with more confidence, since it's not in the entire kind of engineering workflow when it comes to shipping like code. So tools like that. Also, implementation considered prototyping. So when you're working in these kind of like big prototyping tools, a couple of things to think about. This is kind of rapid fire, but if you can work with a tool that supports state logic instead of timeline editing of things like animations, maybe that can be a bit more closer to what's actually going to be implemented. Just speaking a bit from experience here. Also, if you can use API data in your prototypes, maybe you can hit some of those constraints that like would have been hit by engineers later in the process. If you can just like give your prototyping tool the link to the API, which tools like Framer support. And also, if you invest some effort into building either like symbols in Sketch or components in Origami, for example, I think that gets you in the mindset of building components that are that capture more of the constraints that's actually going to be in when you're actually implementing the designs. Yeah, and things like these kind of optimization tricks leads to handoffs that are more easier for everyone, in my experience. Yeah, and maybe we can end up with something more like this when it's not like separate processes, but more like teams working together, and more like understanding what will actually like what the challenges are right up until something is shipped to the end user. Couple more points about building vision with prototypes, because this is another topic that I think is really needed because you're not always defining things to like an engineering team that should build something. Maybe you need to actually you don't have any technology ready, but you need to convince perhaps, I mean, a venture capitalist, but it could be a roadmap planning, or you could have a client, or you can have a customer that you want to sign up for your product. Maybe you just need to show something really engaging, and looks really sweet, because you need to become friends with someone, basically. I think there's space for that too, and kind of stepping away from the technology aspects and just being visionary. And I like to compare that a bit with this. Perhaps you know what this is from. So a Trojan horse. And what I want to bring up here is that there's two parts of a plan like this. I mean, you're presenting something really nice. This needs to convince people. But that's not all of it. You need to have a second part of your plan, which is to ship it. You need to deliver something that also works. And having the awareness that these two parts they kind of come together, I think it's really important. So despite taking on visionary prototypes, you need to know that you should follow through and ship something. Hopefully not an army of soldiers, but you get the point. Another thing, I really like to advocate for really thin slices when it comes to prototypes. Don't build the entire thing. Just find the part that is the most speaking of what you're trying to solve. So this is a really cool example from Apple, latest iPhone. So this is just a video that it doesn't look like an app. There's no onboarding. There's no UI elements, but it really captures the value that you're trying to capture, or the user value basically, and why this product should exist. And that's something to keep in mind, I think, when building prototypes for that visionary purpose. Yeah. A bit of a summary. Prototype what makes sense for your specific purpose, and try to find what is your purpose. Is it to collaborate well with an engineering team? Is it to present a vision? Is it to do a user test? Really try to identify that before you dive into and spend all this effort in these really cool tools that we now got. And yeah, that's all I want to say today. Thank you.